In the middle of a vast, scorching desert, where no creature should survive alone, a starving German shepherd staggered beneath the relentless sun. He had no pack, no human, no hope left in his eyes. But when a pride of lions, known to rule this land with silent fury, encountered the weakened dog, no one expected what would happen next, not even the lions themselves, because what they did left every witness speechless. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, an ocean of sand and blistering heat. Nothing moved, nothing dared, until a shadow limped across the dunes. He was thin, his ribs clearly outlined beneath dusty fur. His paws were cracked from the scorched earth, and every breath came with effort. The German shepherd had once been strong, his body sculpted from discipline, his eyes filled with focus. But now, he was broken. No one knew how he got there. No collar, no tags, just scars and silence. Each step was slower than the last. The sand beneath him blurred. He hadn't eaten in days, hadn't drunk water in longer. And the sun, it didn't care, it just watched. Then, from the crest of a dune came movement. Not one, not two, an entire pride, lions, 7 of them, 3 adult females, 2 nearly grown cubs, and a male with a black-tipped mane like fire at dusk. They didn't roar, they didn't chase, they just watched. Predators meeting prey. The dog collapsed. At the edge of their domain, he dropped into the sand like a discarded memory, and the lions approached. Most would expect what came next to be violent, brutal, inevitable. But something in that moment, some invisible thread shifted. One of the lionesses slowed as she neared the dog. Her ears perked, not in aggression, but curiosity. The shepherd didn't growl, didn't whimper. He just closed his eyes, accepting what he thought was the end. And then the unthinkable happened. The lioness lay down beside him. No teeth, no blood, just stillness, and that stillness was the beginning of everything. No one knew his name, not even he did anymore. Once, perhaps he had one. A name shouted proudly during long walks in the park, a name whispered gently beside a fireplace. But now, that name had dissolved under the weight of heat and abandonment. All that remained was a body in survival mode and a heart too tired to keep hoping. The German shepherd had come from somewhere far beyond the dunes, from a world with fences, concrete roads, and metal cages. He had been used, trained, pushed to obey. His instincts honed not by nature, but by command. But when the war ended, no one claimed him. He was a tool left behind. So he wandered, from city to outpost, from mountain to ravine, until the world disappeared into sand. Now he was nothing more than a ghost in fur. The desert had no memory of him, and for days, neither did he. He had stopped searching for food after the 3rd day, his body too weak to chase, his nose too dry to scent. He had passed carcasses picked clean by vultures, watched distant clouds that promised storms but delivered only wind. He had been a warrior once. Now he was a shadow dying under an open sky. But something strange stirred when the lions approached. They didn't charge and they didn't pounce. They surrounded him, gently. The male, tall and watchful, stood at a distance, his golden eyes narrowing as the shepherd exhaled a shaky breath. The lionesses circled wider, slower, sniffing not out of hunger but uncertainty. This wasn't normal, and perhaps that's what saved him. The youngest cub, a lanky female still growing into her paws, took a step closer. She tilted her head, confused. She had never seen a creature like this. He smelled like metal, like ash, like places lions never went. She reached out with one tentative paw, touched the shepherd's side. He flinched, barely, but didn't retaliate. Her mother stepped forward, letting out a low chuff, a signal, a warning, or a gesture. Whatever it was enough. She lay beside the shepherd, her massive body radiating heat. The others watched, then slowly relaxed their posture. One by one, they settled in a wide circle around the dog, never touching, never trapping, just being. The sun began to fall, the shadows stretched, and somehow The German shepherd made it through the night. When he opened his eyes the next morning, the lions were still there, not gone, not bored, still there. The cub brought him a chunk of dried meat, likely scavenged from a previous kill. He sniffed it, unsure. Then slowly he ate. For the first time in days, his stomach remembered what food was. Later that day, he followed them, not because he trusted them, not yet, but because they moved with purpose. And when you're empty, sometimes purpose is the only thing that keeps your legs from giving out. They walked through ravines and over dunes. They stopped at a hidden waterhole, known only to the wild and the lucky. The lions drank, dipped their paws in the coolness. And when they stepped back, the dog approached. He drank and drank and drank. Something ancient stirred in him, a flicker buried deep. Not obedience, not training, instinct, survival. The male lion watched him closely. He didn't seem pleased or threatened, just observant, measuring something only he could sense. That night, when a sandstorm began to rise on the horizon, the lions took shelter in a crevice beneath a rock overhang. The cubs nestled into their mothers, and the shepherd, he stood in the wind for a moment, letting the sand sting his face. Then, almost against his will, he crawled into the shelter. He didn't curl up beside the lions. Not quite, but close enough to feel their warmth, close enough to matter. Far away, a group of nomadic wildlife trackers picked up the strange prints. "Lion pride," one of them said, crouching low. "Fresh." The other raised an eyebrow. "What about these?" he asked, pointing at the paw prints trailing alongside. The first tracker squinted. They weren't lion, canine, big and limping. "That's not right," he murmured. "There are no wild dogs out here." The second tracker said nothing, but something in his gut twisted. Something unnatural was happening in the dunes, and he was determined to find out what. But as the tracker followed those uneven prints deeper into the desert, he didn't yet know. He wasn't tracking a predator or a prey. He was tracking something entirely new. The days in the desert blurred together, fiery mornings, breathless afternoons, and nights colder than bone. Each day the German shepherd grew a little stronger. His steps became surer. The tremble in his legs faded. The wounds on his paws scabbed over and began to heal. He watched the lions constantly, studying the flow of their movements. How the lionesses hunted in silent, coordinated waves. How the cubs played rough but learned quickly. And how the great male led by presence, not by force. At first, he kept his distance. He would drink only after the others, eat the scraps left behind, and sleep on the very edge of the group. But gradually, something shifted. One evening, as the cubs tumbled and wrestled in the golden light, one of them bounced over to the shepherd and flopped down beside him. She nipped his ear, playful and insistent. He almost snapped, old habits rising, but stopped himself. The cub looked up, curious and fearless. She rolled over, offering her soft belly in trust. He hesitated, then licked her ear gently. From the shade, her mother watched, not with suspicion, but with a kind of pride. The pride accepted him. Slowly but truly, days passed. Each new sunrise brought small acts of trust. A lioness shared a strip of gazelle hide, pushing it toward the shepherd when she was done. The cubs would sometimes sleep pressed against his side, their warmth a comfort he hadn't known since puppyhood. At night, he dreamed less of cages and commands, and more of open sky and quiet company. But not everything was peace. The old lion kept his distance, never sleeping near the shepherd. His eyes, golden and cold, measured the newcomer every day. He tolerated, but did not accept. And always, there was the desert. Predators prowled, hyenas, jackals, desperate things drawn by the scent of the pride. One night, a pack of hyenas crept close, their laughter echoing in the dark. The pride roused quickly, forming a line between the cubs and the threat. The shepherd, without thinking, limped forward and stood at their side. He bared his teeth, letting out a deep, rumbling growl, a sound learned long ago in a different kind of battle. The hyenas hesitated, unused to a dog standing beside lions. They circled, uncertain. One lioness lunged, scattering the boldest of them. The shepherd followed, snapping at flanks and chasing the scavengers into the dark. The pride watched him. For the first time, the old lion offered a chuff of approval. Trust had been earned, yet the desert was changing. The trackers had grown more determined. They followed the prince, finding odd evidence. Half-eaten kills left neat and untouched. Lion prints mingled with canine eat. The sand around watering holes disturbed in patterns that didn't fit any book. One night, as the pride slept, a faint flash appeared on the distant ridge. A camera lens. The shepherd's ear flicked. He rose quietly and padded toward the edge of the group. His eyes caught the movement. A pair of men, crouched in the darkness, scribbling notes, cameras at the ready. He remembered the sound of cages, the clink of metal, the click of collars. His heart beat faster. Should he run? Wake the pride? Hide? But before he could move, the old lion stood beside him. The king stared into the darkness, unafraid. A low growl rumbled in his chest, so deep it vibrated the earth. The shepherd found himself copying the sound, his growl a softer echo. The trackers saw only silhouettes, lion and dog side by side. They snapped photos, certain no one would believe what they'd found. But they didn't come closer. Not yet. Dawn came. The pride moved on. The shepherd kept his eyes peeled, instincts on edge. He knew the desert was unforgiving. But now, the real danger was not hunger or thirst. It was discovery. What would happen if humans found him again? Would they separate him from the only family he'd ever chosen? Would they try to rescue him, not understanding he wasn't lost, but found? For the first time, he was afraid of something besides dying. He was afraid of being taken away from where he finally belonged. That evening, as the pride lay beneath the fading sun, the shepherd pressed close to the smallest cub, resting his muzzle on her back. He watched the ridge for movement. He would protect them, no matter the cost. But in the shadows beyond the dune, the trackers planned their next move, and this time, they weren't coming alone. As night fell, the shepherd's ears caught the distant drone of an engine, unnatural, hungry, and headed straight for the pride. Tomorrow, the desert would change forever. The next morning broke with a restless wind. The sand shifted in uneasy spirals across the dunes, as if the desert itself sensed what was coming. The pride moved early, led by the old lion. The cubs raced and tumbled behind, unaware of the tension in their mother's shoulders or the way the shepherd's nose worked the air constantly, picking up scents that didn't belong. By mid-morning, the sun glared cruelly overhead, and the pride settled in the shadow of a rock outcrop. The shepherd paced at the edge of the shade, restless, his ears pinned back. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the wind. An engine, close now, closer than the night before. The lions rose as one, hackles raised. The cubs were herded toward the center. The shepherd stepped between them and the ridge, growling, fur bristling. The old lion gave a deep, thunderous roar, sending birds scattering from their nests. And then, from beyond the crest, a battered white truck crawled into view. It stopped just out of reach, dust swirling around the tires. Two men stepped out, both in khaki, armed with cameras, binoculars, and, ominously, a tranquilizer rifle. They kept their distance at first, snapping photos and whispering urgently. But soon, one motioned to the other, who retrieved a radio from the cab. "Base, we found them. Pride with a canine, looks like a German shepherd. No collar, no aggression yet, but it's real. Repeat, it's real." The shepherd's heart pounded. He recognized the tone, the clipped words. This wasn't a rescue, it was a mission. One of the lionesses crouched low, ready to charge. The men didn't advance, but the tension in their bodies grew. The one with the rifle took aim, not at the lions, but at the shepherd. He froze. Everything inside him screamed to run, but he remembered the cubs behind him, trembling. He took a step forward, drawing their attention away from the others. He barked, loud and sharp, startling everyone. The lions looked at him, surprised. The men hesitated, the one with the rifle lowering his weapon, unsure. The old lion, sensing the shift, stood tall and proud, moving to flank the shepherd. For a moment, predator and dog faced the world together. But then, a third vehicle appeared, a black truck with government insignia. Doors flew open. Two men in uniform stepped out, followed by a woman in a crisp shirt and mirrored sunglasses. She surveyed the scene, then lifted a loudspeaker to her mouth. "This is the Wildlife Authority. Remain calm. We are here to ensure the safety of all animals present." The lions roared in response, the sound echoing for miles. The shepherd didn't move. He met the woman's gaze, his body rigid. She studied him carefully. Then, to everyone's shock, she spoke directly to him. "Hey, it's all right, boy. You're safe. We're not here to hurt you. We want to help." He didn't believe her, not yet. One of the uniformed men stepped forward, hand extended, a tranquilizer dart visible in his grip. The shepherd growled, louder this time. The lions shifted. Two lionesses stepped forward, snarling. The man hesitated, glancing back at the woman. She raised a hand, signaling him to stop. "Let's wait," she said. "He's not a threat." The standoff dragged on in the burning sun. The lions stood their ground. The shepherd didn't retreat. Then, in a single, unexpected move, the smallest cub slipped out from behind her mother and trotted straight to the shepherd, pressing her head against his side. He stood taller, tail rising, as if protecting her was more important than anything the humans could offer. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. The woman lowered her megaphone and spoke quietly to her team. "Document everything, but don't intervene unless absolutely necessary." The men complied, uneasy but obedient. For now, a fragile peace held, but the shepherd sensed the balance could tip with a single mistake. And in the eyes of the lions, he saw the same question. Would he run, or would he fight for them, against his own kind? As the sun set, the authorities backed off, their vehicles blending into the distance. But they promised to return, with reinforcements. That night, as the pride lay together, the shepherd remained awake, ears swiveling to every sound. He watched the horizon, the cub pressed into his side. He had a choice to make, run before dawn, or risk everything and stay with the only family that had ever accepted him. But as the stars spread across the sky, he realized something had changed deep within him. He was no longer a stray, no longer a soldier. He was a guardian, and for the first time, he wasn't afraid to belong. But as the first light touched the sand, the shepherd caught the scent of something new: fear. The pride wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. In the dark, another set of eyes watched, waiting for the right moment to strike. As dawn broke, a cold wind swept across the sand. The pride was awake early, restless. Even the cubs, usually full of mischief, stuck close to their mothers. The shepherd paced along the outskirts of their shelter, scanning every ripple in the dunes for signs of movement. He could sense it. Something had shifted in the desert. The tension from yesterday lingered, thick and sour. He caught the faintest whiff of engine oil on the breeze, confirming his fears. The humans were not far. He kept his body between the cubs and the open sand, a silent sentinel, his chest rising and falling with each alert breath. The old lion prowled the perimeter, making himself visible atop a high ridge. He was sending a message. This territory is claimed, but his eyes often flickered back to the shepherd, as if questioning whether the dog could be trusted when the world grew hostile. The sun had barely climbed before a new unsettling sound rolled across the desert. Not a motor, not voices, something deeper, guttural, animal. The shepherd froze. He knew that sound from the time before the pride. A leopard. It was rare to see them here, but not impossible, especially in desperate times. This one, young and lean, prowled the fringes, drawn by the scent of cubs and weakness. The lions bristled but did not scatter. The old male led the charge, his mane blown back by the morning wind. The lionesses followed, forming a wall between the cubs and the approaching shadow. But the leopard was cunning. He didn't attack outright. He circled, testing their focus, searching for a break. In that chaos, the humans reappeared, a single white truck on the horizon, approaching at speed. The shepherd barked, sharp and urgent, and the pride tightened their ranks. The cubs whined, uncertain where the danger truly lay, man or beast. The vehicle skidded to a halt 50 yards away. The woman from before emerged, raising both hands in a gesture of peace. "Stay back," she called to her team. Her eyes flicked from the lions to the shepherd. "We're not here to harm you." She saw the leopard too, stalking closer behind a mound of sand, muscles rippling under its spotted coat. The shepherd's instincts snapped into focus. He darted to the cubs, nudging them behind the largest lioness, then turned to face the leopard, hackles raised. The old lion let out a roar so fierce it seemed to shake the ground, but the leopard did not flee. Hunger burned in its yellow eyes. The humans watched, torn between documenting and intervening. The woman lifted her radio. "Hold your positions. Do not shoot." The leopard lunged. It was chaos. Sand flying, lions roaring, the shepherd leaping forward to intercept. He bit down on the leopard's flank, feeling old pain spark in his jaw, but held tight. The big cat twisted, slashing at his face, but the shepherd refused to let go. The lionesses seized the moment, piling onto the intruder. The leopard, outnumbered and overpowered, finally wrenched free and fled, vanishing into the dunes with a bleeding leg and a scream of frustration. The shepherd staggered, blood dripping from a shallow cut on his muzzle. The old lion came close, breathing hard, and, astonishingly, rubbed his mane gently against the shepherd's side. Acceptance, gratitude. The cubs swarmed the shepherd, nuzzling him, licking his wounds. But the victory was not complete. The humans began to approach, emboldened by the sight of the leopard's retreat. The woman called out, "Is he hurt? Can we help?" The lions growled, drawing together. The shepherd backed up, placing himself between the pride and the advancing figures. He didn't know these people. He didn't trust their good intentions. Too many memories of hands that promised help but delivered cages and needles. The woman stopped, holding her ground. "We want to protect him, but we can't do that if he stays with you." Her team started to form a semicircle, hoping to cut him off. The shepherd glanced at the lions, at the cubs pressing against his side, then at the open desert. He realized then he could run and leave them to fate, or stand his ground and risk everything for the family that chose him. His muscles tensed, his eyes narrowed. He wouldn't run, not now, not ever, but he had no idea what the humans would try next, or if another predator, emboldened by chaos, might attack while the pride was divided. The desert was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a battleground for belonging. As the shepherd squared his stance and prepared to defend the pride, he heard a sudden crack, a rifle shot echoing across the dunes. Someone had fired, and in the blur of sand and sun, it wasn't clear who the bullet was meant for. The crack of the rifle tore the morning wide open. For a split second, time stopped. Every head turned. The lions crouched low, snarling, ready to pounce or flee. The cubs screamed, scrambling behind their mothers. The shepherd stood motionless, heart pounding, searching for blood, for pain, for the answer to who had been hit. Sand exploded near his front paw, a warning shot, not a kill. The woman spun on her team, fury in her voice. "Who fired?" "I gave no order." Her eyes blazed behind her sunglasses as she spotted a young ranger, gun still shaking in his hands, terror written all over his face. I was trying to scare the animals back," he stammered. "You could have killed someone," she snapped, voice low and dangerous. The old lion growled, stepping forward, hackles high. The shepherd mirrored him, body braced, gaze never leaving the line of humans. The pride was on the edge. One more wrong move and blood would stain the sand. The woman dropped to one knee, lowering herself to appear non-threatening. She spoke not to her team, not to her superiors, but to the shepherd. "Listen to me. I know what it's like to be trapped between two worlds, but you're not alone. Let us help you." He didn't move. His mind flashed with memories of voices like hers, promising safety, then delivering steel cages and separation from all he loved. The lions shifted, uncertain, ready to bolt or fight at a breath. But then, the smallest cub whimpered, soft and frightened. Instinct overcame the shepherd's fear. He nudged her behind her mother, taking the brunt of the tension onto himself. The woman saw the gesture. "He's protecting them," she murmured, awestruck. "He's not wild, he's loyal." The young ranger, still shaken, whispered, "Maybe we should just leave them." but a grizzled man stepped from the back of the group, older, with scars on his hands. "That's no ordinary stray," he muttered. "That's the one from the compound outside Marrakesh. They said he vanished after the fire." The shepherd heard the word, Marrakesh, the world he'd run from, the place that burned in his dreams. His hackles rose, but his gaze stayed forward. "Don't approach him," the woman ordered. "Document, observe. Do not intervene unless it's life or death." Her voice trembled, despite her control. For hours, the standoff continued. The lions circled warily, the cubs hidden and watched over by mothers and by the shepherd. The humans made camp at a respectful distance, cameras rolling, radios crackling with quiet arguments. The desert sun climbed high. Tension became exhaustion. By late afternoon, something changed. A group of jackals, hungry and bold, began to prowl the outskirts of the camp, sensing the pride's vulnerability. The lions formed a defensive ring, but the shepherd noticed a new threat. 2 cubs, curious, had strayed toward the edge of the shade, away from their mothers. A jackal broke from the pack, darting toward them. Without hesitation, the shepherd sprinted, body burning, wounds reopened, throwing himself between the cubs and the attacker. He barked, sharp and savage, teeth flashing. The jackal snapped at him, but he held his ground, biting hard until the scavenger yelped and fled. The humans gasped, some reaching for their rifles, but the shepherd didn't attack the people. He returned to the cubs and nuzzling them, guiding them back to safety. The woman saw it all, and her heart changed. "He's their guardian," she whispered. "We can't separate him." The grizzled man scowled, but said nothing. That night, as the sun dropped below the horizon and shadows crawled across the sand, the mood shifted again. The lions huddled close, the shepherd lying in their midst. The humans retreated to their camp, subdued, their bravado drained by what they'd witnessed. The woman stayed awake long after her team had turned in, notebook in hand. She scribbled furiously, chronicling what no textbook could explain. A dog, trained, abandoned, transformed, leading lions not as an alpha, but as a bridge between worlds. But beyond the firelight, another danger crept. The leopard, wounded and furious from the morning's failed attack, circled the pride once more. This time, it was not alone. A rival jackal pack flanked its approach, drawn by the smell of blood and fear. The shepherd's ears pricked. He rose, growling, the pride following his lead. The real test was coming, not from men with guns, but from the wild itself. Would they stand together, or would old instincts tear them apart? In the blackness, just beyond the circle of the lions, green eyes glinted. The shepherd braced himself as the sand erupted in snarls and screams. The final battle for the desert had begun. Night in the desert was nothing like day. It was colder, sharper, full of unseen threats. The wind moaned over the dunes, whipping sand into whirls that glittered under the moon. The pride huddled together, every body pressed close for warmth and courage. But courage alone would not be enough. The shepherd stood at the edge of the group, his breath misting in the cool air, every muscle tense. He could hear the jackals, their laughter ugly, insistent, echoing off the rocks. He could smell the leopard, still out there, lurking with a patience born of hunger and pain. He looked back at the lions. The old male met his gaze, then let out a short, gruff chuff, a signal of trust. The lionesses flattened their ears and rose, flanking the shepherd, forming a wall of muscle and teeth around the cubs. Suddenly, chaos erupted. The jackals came first, their eyes wild with hunger. They darted in, snapping and yipping, trying to separate the weakest from the group. The lionesses struck with claws and fangs, but there were too many to drive off in one blow. The shepherd lunged, intercepting a jackal that had slipped past the others. His jaws clamped around its leg, sending it howling away. 2 more attacked from behind, teeth flashing, but the shepherd spun and kicked, refusing to yield. He was everywhere, herding cubs away from danger, biting, barking, dodging claws and teeth. Then, in the confusion, the leopard made its move. Silent as a shadow, it leapt from the rocks, aiming for the smallest cub cowering behind her mother. The lioness tried to react, but the leap was perfectly timed, a killer's precision. The shepherd saw it happen in slow motion. He flung himself forward, slamming into the leopard mid-air. They tumbled through the sand, a blur of snarls and slashing claws. The leopard was stronger, its muscles fueled by pure, desperate rage. Its teeth found the shepherd's shoulder, digging deep. But the shepherd didn't let go. He held on, anchoring the leopard's attack away from the cub. Even as pain seared through him, he barked, desperate and furious, calling the pride to action. The old lion responded first, crashing into the fight, biting the leopard's flank. Two lionesses joined, and together they overwhelmed the predator, driving it off into the night with wounds it might not survive. Blood stained the sand. The air was thick with the scent of fear and victory. The jackals, sensing the shift, scattered into the darkness. The pride regrouped, licking wounds, trembling with adrenaline. The shepherd staggered, breath ragged, his shoulder bleeding freely. He lay down, exhausted, sides heaving. The smallest cub limped over and curled up against his chest, refusing to let him be alone. The lions gathered around, forming a tight circle. For the first time, the old male lay beside the shepherd, pressing his great head into the dog's neck, a gesture reserved for kin. The line between dog and lion had vanished. They were a family now, bound not by blood, but by the trials they'd survived together. At the edge of the humans' camp, the woman watched through binoculars, breath caught in her throat. She had seen violence before, but never bravery like this, not from a dog who, by all logic, should have run or cowered. She lowered the glass and whispered, "Let him be. He's earned his place." But not everyone agreed. The older ranger shook his head. "He's still dangerous. To them, to us. If he ever turns." The woman stared at him, fierce. "He's not the threat. He's the reason they're still alive." That night, as the moon rose high, the shepherd drifted in and out of sleep. He dreamed of steel cages and burning buildings, of the long walk across endless sand. But mostly, he dreamed of the pride, of cubs pressed close, of a place he belonged. Yet even as dawn neared, a new challenge waited on the horizon. The government would not let this story end quietly. The world was watching now, and soon the pride and their guardian would have to choose between freedom and captivity, survival and separation. As the first light touched his bloodied fur, the shepherd opened his eyes to the sound of approaching vehicles. The next battle would not be against fang or claw, but against the will of those who claimed to know what was best. And this time, there would be no easy victory. The morning sun revealed more than just blood on the sand. It exposed a circle of vehicles drawn up along the ridge, black SUVs, government trucks, even a news van. The world outside the desert had finally caught up. Cameras pointed. Uniformed officers waited, tense and wary. Drones buzzed overhead, transmitting every movement to far-off screens. The pride sensed the change. The old lion stood, mane matted with dust and dried blood, and stared up at the machines, his face both defiant and exhausted. The lionesses pressed their cubs close, their bodies forming a trembling wall of instinctive protection. The shepherd struggled to his feet, pain radiating from his wounded shoulder, but he would not let it show, not to the pride, not to the strangers. He stood tall, chest forward, tail raised in silent challenge. A loudspeaker crackled, "This is the Department of Wildlife and Security. Do not attempt to flee. Remain where you are." The woman who had watched everything unfold now stood at the edge of the human circle, flanked by officials in suits. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm but resolute. "We are not here to harm you. Our goal is to relocate all animals safely." She caught the shepherd's gaze and, for a moment, softened. A man in a dark suit stepped forward, someone new, with eyes that never blinked. He addressed the woman quietly. "Your compassion is noted, but we have orders. The dog is to be separated from the pride and transported for evaluation." "No," she said quietly, shaking her head. "You saw what he did. He's not a threat. He's a bridge." The man's jaw tightened. "It's not your decision. Move aside," he signaled to the rangers. Four approached, carrying nets and tranquilizer guns. The lions roared, tails lashing. The cubs whimpered, huddling behind the lionesses. The shepherd positioned himself in front of them all, teeth bared, body quivering with exhaustion and determination. The lead ranger raised his rifle. "Easy, boy. Don't make us hurt you." The shepherd didn't move. The woman stepped in front of the rangers and hands raised. "Stop! You'll cause a stampede. You don't understand." The man in the suit cut her off. "Miss Warren, step back. This is no longer under your purview." For a moment, chaos loomed. But then, from among the assembled officials, a small voice called out. It was a child, no more than 8, clutching her mother's hand, eyes wide with awe. "Mom, why are they hurting the dog? He's helping the lions. He's a hero." The cameras caught her words. The feed broadcast across screens around the world. A murmur ran through the crowd of officials, news crews, even among the rangers. Doubt, sympathy. The woman, Warren, seized the moment. She turned to the cameras. This German shepherd survived because he found family, not because he was rescued by us. He protected this pride. He saved their cubs. Maybe it's time we ask who really needs saving here. Her words struck a chord, but the man in the suit wouldn't relent. He barked an order. "Move in." The rangers hesitated, some genuinely torn. The shepherd met their gaze, his eyes dark but clear. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. As the rangers advanced, a strange thing happened. The pride, instead of scattering, closed ranks around him. The old lion stood shoulder to shoulder with the dog. The lionesses pressed their flanks to his. Even the cubs, sensing the gravity of the moment, gathered at his feet. They would not let him go alone. The crowd saw it, a wall of unity, defiance, and mutual trust that no cage or tranquilizer could easily break. The rangers faltered, lowering their guns, uncertain. But the man in the suit pulled a pistol, his patience broken. He aimed at the shepherd. "Stand down," Warren screamed. Time froze. The shepherd stared down the barrel, memories flooding, cages, fire, the endless walk across sand. He did not flinch. He did not flee. And in that instant, before the man could pull the trigger, a roar shattered the air, the old lions, louder and deeper than ever before. It was a warning and a vow. The crowd gasped, and the shepherd, battered and bleeding, stepped forward to meet fate head-on. The shot rang out, echoing across the desert. No one could tell, in that single breathless second, if it was a bullet of mercy or the beginning of war. But the world was watching, and nothing would ever be the same again. For a moment, the world seemed to stop spinning. The sound of the gunshot hung in the air, a single, endless echo rolling over the dunes. No one moved, not the humans, not the lions, not the shepherd, who stood with his body blocking the pride. Time itself held its breath. Then, slowly, the truth revealed itself. The bullet had struck the sand mere inches from the shepherd's front paw. Another warning, but this time with deadly intent. The man in the suit's hand trembled, his face twisted with frustration and fear. Around him, even the rangers recoiled, stunned by how close he'd come to a tragedy seen by the entire world. A cry rang out from the crowd. The little girl clung to her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Stop! Don't hurt them!" Warren, shaking with adrenaline, lunged forward and knocked the pistol from the man's grasp. It fell into the sand and was instantly lost among the dust and debris. The shepherd, breathing hard, kept his stance. The lion stood behind him, their trust in him absolute. The old lion pressed his forehead to the shepherd's back, a silent act of solidarity. The lionesses gathered the cubs close, their eyes never leaving the humans. The crowd began to change. A murmur swelled, of anger, of empathy, of something bigger than protocol. The news cameras caught every second. Warren took the opportunity. She turned, her voice clear and strong. "You all saw what happened here. This dog chose family over fear, loyalty over instinct. If we claim to be the stewards of nature, then let's prove it, by respecting the bonds we don't fully understand." A ranger, moved by her words, spoke up. "Let the pride go. Let the shepherd decide where he belongs." The man in the suit, realizing he was losing control, tried to protest, but the crowd, officials, rangers, onlookers, closed ranks against him. He was outnumbered. his authority unraveling in the face of raw collective will. A tense silence fell. Then, the unexpected happened. The shepherd, sensing the moment, stepped forward, not toward the authorities, but toward Warren. He stopped a few feet away, lowered his head and waited. It was a gesture not of submission, but of trust, a silent message. "I'm willing to listen, if you are." Warren knelt, her hands open. "What do you want, boy?" The shepherd turned and looked back at the pride. The old lion met his gaze and gave a slow, solemn blink. The cubs whined, missing their guardian. The shepherd turned again to Warren, searching her eyes. Finally, he walked back to the pride, circling them slowly. He nudged each cub, licked the wounds of the lionesses, and pressed his muzzle to the old lion's mane. It was a farewell and a blessing all at once. He stood, head held high, in the golden light of morning. Then he walked back toward Warren and the humans. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Some saw it as surrender, others as hope. Warren rose to meet him. She put a gentle hand on his head, whispering words only he could hear. The rangers stood down, lowering their guns. Behind them, the pride watched, silent, still, not understanding but somehow accepting. As the shepherd was led to a waiting vehicle, he looked back only once. The old lion lifted his head, letting out a single, low roar. The cubs tumbled forward, calling for their friend. Warren promised, "We'll take care of him. He won't be caged, not while I'm here." The shepherd wagged his tail just once. He had chosen. But the story wasn't over. Because in the distance, on the far side of the dunes, the leopard's wounded form appeared once more, drawn by the scent of change. And the pride, though stronger now, would face a world forever altered, without the dog who had taught them that family could look like anything, as long as there was trust. As the shepherd's crate was lifted into the vehicle, the wind carried one last howl over the desert, a call not of loss, but of promise. The world would have to decide if it would honor that promise or let the wild go silent once again. The ride away from the desert was long and jarring. The shepherd lay in a large kennel at the back of the government truck, the bars wide enough for him to see the world rushing by. Sand dunes fading into scrub, scrub into roads, roads into buildings. For the first time since he'd crossed the burning sands, he was utterly alone. Warren sat beside the crate, hands resting on the metal, her presence steady and quiet. She tried to reassure him, but he barely moved, eyes fixed on the window as the desert slipped away behind him. Every bump in the road echoed with the loss of the pride, the cub's warmth, the old lion's silent trust. At the edge of the desert, the convoy stopped at a research outpost, sterile, busy, full of white coats and clipboards. The shepherd was gently coaxed into a clean, airy enclosure. Not a cage, but not freedom either. Rangers brought water and fresh food, trying to make him comfortable. But the shepherd only sniffed at it, searching for the scent of sun and fur and wildness. Warren visited him every hour, sitting quietly on the floor, reading reports aloud, sometimes just talking about the outside world. But when she left at night, he curled into the farthest corner, nose tucked under his tail, and dreamed of the lions. Back in the desert, things changed quickly. Without the shepherd, the pride moved cautiously. The old lion watched the horizon for hours at a time. The cubs played less and clung to their mothers. Danger crept closer each night. The wounded leopard, sensing an opening, circled more boldly. Jackals gathered on the wind. Yet something remained of the shepherd's presence. The cubs mimicked his stances, barking little warnings at jackals. The lionesses defended the perimeter more fiercely. The old lion paced, leaving strong scents along the dunes, but all of them felt the gap he'd left behind. At the research center, Warren met resistance. Officials wanted to evaluate the shepherd, arguing that his bond with the lions was dangerous, unnatural. They pressed for transfer to a remote sanctuary, far from the pride and for observation. She argued, fought, showed hours of footage, the shepherd saving the cubs, breaking up hunts, healing wounds with nothing but a gentle touch and unwavering courage. "He's not a subject," she pleaded. "He's a bridge." But bureaucracy was relentless. orders came down. The shepherd would be relocated to a distant reserve, never to return to the desert or the pride. On the night before his scheduled transfer, Warren returned to his enclosure, tears burning her eyes. She opened the gate and sat beside him. "You changed them," she whispered. "You changed us. I'm sorry I can't do more." The shepherd lifted his head, looking deep into her eyes. For a long time, they sat in silence. Then a noise broke the quiet, raised voices at the gate, an argument between rangers. Warren stood, tense. The shepherd's ears perked, instincts flickering back to life. Suddenly, a familiar scent drifted in through the open window. Sand, fur, wildness. Warren frowned. Impossible. But just then, a chorus of low, rumbling growls echoed in the night air. She ran to the window, peering into the darkness. At the edge of the compound's lights, 5 shadows waited. 4 lionesses and a single, regal old lion. His mane unmistakable even in the gloom. The pride had come for their guardian. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared. Rangers shouted, trying to drive the lions back. But the pride stood their ground, refusing to run. The shepherd barked, desperate, pressing against the bars. Warren acted without thinking. She opened the enclosure fully and knelt. "Go," she whispered. "Go home." He sprinted into the night, racing across the sand, through the fence, toward the pride. The reunion was raw and wordless. Cubs licking his face, lionesses nuzzling his neck, the old lion pressing his head to the shepherd's flank in relief. Even the humans watching could only stare, some with anger, some with awe, some with tears. But as Warren watched the scene, she saw more than joy. She saw the price of freedom, the risk, the uncertainty, the world's unwillingness to accept what it didn't understand. She saw the future. Not easy, not safe, but chosen. As dawn painted the desert in gold, the pride melted back into the wild, the shepherd at their side. Cameras captured the moment, but no fence could contain it now. Yet in the shadows, the wounded leopard crept closer, more desperate than ever. And on the horizon, new vehicles appeared, carrying men determined to impose order on what could never truly be owned. The shepherd led the pride into the rising sun, every step a challenge to the world behind him. But as the roars of the lions faded and the sand swallowed their tracks, only one question remained. Could any sanctuary, man-made or wild, truly protect them now? For days, the pride and the shepherd moved deeper into the desert, away from roads and fences, ever watchful for both human pursuit and the threats of the wild. Freedom was a fragile thing, won not with a single act, but with every cautious step, every careful choice. They found an oasis, a hidden crescent of green at the heart of a dry sea. Water shimmered under sparse trees, and in the evening, the air was alive with the distant calls of birds and the slow, steady breath of the earth itself. Here, for a time, it seemed they could rest. The cubs returned to play, splashing in the shallows and chasing dragonflies. The lionesses grew sleek again, their wounds healing, their eyes brighter in the golden dusk. The old lion, though slower, patrolled the boundary every night, leaving his scent as both warning and invitation. The shepherd took to sleeping in the shade of a tamarisk, watching the sky turn violet each evening. He nursed the scars of his battles, some healing, others destined to remain forever. Yet peace in the wild is always borrowed, never owned. At night, the distant growls and screams of the leopard grew bolder. Hunger and pain had made the great cat reckless. More than once, the pride awoke to find paw prints just beyond the light, the scent of blood and desperation in the air. But another presence lingered too. On the far edge of the oasis, the tracks of humans reappeared, boot prints in soft sand, crushed reeds near the water. Rangers, perhaps, or poachers drawn by the news. The shepherd caught whiffs of fuel, metal, and sweat. He doubled his patrols, refusing to let the family he had fought for be taken unawares. One evening, as the sun bled red across the dunes, the pride gathered by the water's edge. The old lion led them in a chorus of roars, a warning to rivals, a declaration to the sky. The shepherd joined in, not with a roar, but with a deep, echoing bark. It was a song of unity, a sound that belonged to neither species but both, Across the water, Warren watched with binoculars. She had followed at a distance, her heart torn between duty and loyalty. Officially, she was supposed to track and report. Secretly, she made sure no one got close enough to do harm. That night, she left a cache of supplies, meat, water, antibiotics, hidden beneath a flat stone, hoping the Pride or the shepherd would find it. She scribbled a note, tucking it under the lid. "You are not alone. Some of us are fighting for you." But not everyone was on their side. Elsewhere, the man in the suit from the agency met with local rangers and a private contractor. He was determined to recapture the shepherd, convinced the dog's influence threatened everything he knew about order and control. "First thing at dawn," he said, voice cold, "we move in. No cameras, no hesitation." Back at the oasis, the shepherd heard distant movement in the night. He woke the Pride, herding them to the edge of the water, ears flicking at every snap of twig. The old lion stood beside him, eyes shining in the moonlight. A silent pact passed between them. "We stay. We fight. We do not run." As dawn approached, the danger grew nearer. The leopard crept close, eyes burning with desperation. The men with guns circled on the far ridge, planning their approach. The Pride huddled together, the shepherd pressing close to the cubs, his body a living shield. For the first time since escaping the compound, he realized that true freedom had a price he was willing to pay, but not alone. Warren watched from a hidden vantage point, radio trembling in her hand. She could hear the orders, the barked commands. She could feel the fear in the animal's eyes, the tension in the sand itself. A single gunshot rang out, shattering the silence. The Pride erupted, roaring, scattering, cubs screaming. The shepherd darted through the chaos, searching for the source, heart racing. Was it the leopard? The men? Was this the end, or one more desperate chance at escape? As the first rays of sunlight spilled across the oasis, the shepherd found himself face to face with both the leopard and the barrel of a gun. And in that impossible instant, every life he'd fought to save would depend on the choice he made next. The world shrank to a single heartbeat. On one side, the wounded leopard, shoulders crouched, eyes wild, claws glinting in the morning light. On the other, a pair of men in uniform, one with a tranquilizer gun, the other with a rifle drawn for real bullets. Between them, the Pride, scattered, roaring, cubs pressed against their mothers in panic. And at the center of it all, the shepherd, bleeding, tired but unbroken. The leopard sprang first, lunging for the nearest cub. The lionesses rushed to block, but the distance was too great. The cub's terrified squeal split the air. The shepherd reacted without thinking. He raced across the sand, body screaming with pain, and intercepted the big cat mid-leap. Their bodies collided in a swirl of fur and claws. The shepherd bit down on the leopard's neck, using every last ounce of strength, refusing to let go even as claws raked his side. The men shouted, weapons raised. The leopard thrashed wildly, breaking free with a scream. The shepherd staggered but did not fall. A shot rang out, tranquilizer, then real bullet. Both missed, thudding into the sand. The old lion roared, charging the men, who faltered, stunned by the sudden fury. One dropped his gun, the other fired blindly, the bullet ricocheting off a stone. Warren, watching from her hidden vantage, ran toward the chaos, waving her arms. "Stop! You're making it worse." The man in the suit ignored her, barking orders into his radio. The leopard circled back, desperate now, and went for the shepherd himself. They crashed together, rolling into the shallow edge of the oasis. Water frothed, blood swirling. The shepherd's vision blurred, but he remembered the cubs, remembered what it meant to be needed. He surged upward, jaws snapping, catching the leopard's foreleg. The cat screeched, twisting to bite, but the shepherd held fast, dragging the fight away from the Pride. At the same time, the old lion seized the opportunity, pinning the leopard from behind. The two worked in perfect, wordless tandem, nature and survivor, king and guardian. The leopard, outnumbered and wounded, finally broke free and fled into the dunes, his shadow melting in the dawn. The men hesitated. The Pride regrouped, standing between their enemies and their wounded protector. Then another shot. This one struck home. The shepherd yelped, his hind leg collapsing as the tranquilizer dart embedded itself in his muscle. He tried to stand, swayed, and fell heavily to the sand. A scream broke from Warren's lips. She ran to the shepherd's side, hands trembling. "No, no, no. Please, not now." The old lion stood over the fallen dog, growling so deeply it shook the air. The ranger who fired the dart looked uncertain, gun lowering as the weight of what he'd done settled on him. The cubs crept forward, pressing against the shepherd's fur, refusing to leave him. Warren wept, stroking his head. "Stay with me. You have to stay." Around them, the desert went silent. The men, faced with the unity of the pride, the grief of a woman who'd risked everything, backed away, shamefaced and shaken. The shepherd's eyes closed, breath slowing. But just before he faded, he heard a sound, a deep, resonant roar, then another and another, until the whole pride was calling, voices blending in the dawn. The shepherd's heart beat once more, slow but strong. Warren pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "You're home. You'll always be home." And with that promise echoing in his ears, he let go, drifting into sleep, not as a prisoner, but as a hero, surrounded by those who loved him. But as the dust settled and the sun rose higher, every person and every animal at the oasis knew something had changed. The boundaries between wild and tame, between enemy and ally, between freedom and captivity, had blurred forever. And as the world watched, the next chapter of the desert story began to write itself in the tracks, and the silence and the roar of a family remade. In the hush after the battle, as the shepherd slept among the lions and Warren pleaded with the authorities, one last figure emerged at the edge of the oasis, a child with tears in her eyes, whispering a single question: will he ever be free again? The answer hung in the air, waiting for the morning to decide. The desert was quiet, but not at peace. As the shepherd lay motionless, surrounded by the pride and the trembling hands of Warren, it seemed that time itself had paused, holding its breath to see what would come next. Officials argued at the edge of the oasis, their voices lost in the wind. Rangers averted their eyes, unwilling to meet the gaze of the old lion, whose silent grief was more powerful than any roar. The little girl who had watched everything knelt at the shepherd's side. Her fingers tangled in his fur. She whispered, "You're not alone. You never were." Warren pressed her palm to the dog's ribcage, feeling the slow, steady beat beneath her hand. "He's alive. He's still breathing," she said, voice shaking with both hope and dread. The authorities wanted order. They wanted the shepherd moved, tagged, studied, turned into an example, a warning, maybe a myth to justify their rules. But something in that moment broke the old pattern. The lions refused to move. They lay around the shepherd, their bodies forming a protective ring, their faces fierce and mournful. The cubs nestled into his side, refusing to budge even when rangers tried to shoo them away. The news cameras broadcast it all. The pride standing guard, the woman crying, the little girl holding on to hope. And the world saw. Phones buzzed with messages of outrage, compassion, wonder. Social media exploded. Protests erupted, demanding justice not just for the shepherd, but for the pride, for the wild, for the right to choose, for the very idea that love and loyalty could cross even nature's most ancient boundaries. Under that pressure, the officials relented. They sent word to higher-ups. A single directive came back: stand down, let them be. Warren, shaking, thanked the rangers who stepped back. Please, just give them time. For hours, no one moved. The desert sun rose higher, then began to fall. The pride watched the shepherd's shallow breaths, waited for any sign. Finally, as dusk painted the sand in gold and violet, the shepherd stirred. His eyes opened, dazed but alive. The old lion was the first to greet him, licking his wounds with rough affection. The cubs whimpered with joy. Even Warren, who had refused to hope, broke into tears, hugging the little girl beside her. The shepherd tried to stand, legs wobbling, but the pride helped, pressing against him, supporting him until he could rise. He limped to the water's edge, every step watched by a crowd that had come to see a spectacle and instead found themselves witness to a miracle. He drank deeply. Then, as the sun slipped below the horizon, the shepherd did something no one expected. He walked toward the authorities, pride by his side, and sat calmly before them. He looked up at Warren, then at the little girl. He looked back at the pride, eyes full of stories and memories and an unbreakable love. Warren knelt. "What do you want, boy?" The shepherd glanced at the horizon, where the wild called. And then, with a quiet certainty, he turned, not toward the vehicles, not toward the world of men, but back to the pride. He chose them. He chose freedom. He chose the family that had chosen him. The officials watched, speechless, as the pride and their guardian vanished into the desert. A living symbol of hope and defiance, a challenge to every line ever drawn between species, between freedom and captivity. And as the news cameras rolled, the world finally understood. Some bonds are written in sand and blood and shared survival. Some heroes walk on four legs. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go, trusting those you love to find their own way. When darkness fell, the shepherd and the pride rested together beneath the stars. He was no longer a stray, no longer an experiment. He was simply home. The days that followed were quieter, as if the desert itself needed to recover from all it had witnessed. The pride and the shepherd wandered deeper into the wild, beyond the reach of roads and men. Their bond grew stronger. The cubs, once shy and fearful, now leapt with confidence, shadowing the shepherd on his morning patrols. The lionesses rested easier at night, comforted by the presence of a guardian who belonged to two worlds, yet was claimed by theirs alone. The old lion, his mane silvered by time and struggle, grew slower but no less proud. He and the shepherd often sat together on a high dune, watching the sun bleed orange across endless sands. They needed no words, just the comfort of company and the shared weight of survival. Far away, the story continued to echo. News outlets replayed the images, a battered dog standing between lions and men, a pride refusing to abandon its friend, a child's tearful plea. Debates raged in governments and across dinner tables about the meaning of wildness, the limits of science, the ethics of intervention, the mysterious heart of loyalty. Warren, released from her duties but never from her promise, became a quiet advocate for coexistence. She visited the edge of the desert, leaving water and medicine at hidden caches, always hoping to catch a glimpse of the unlikely family she'd risked everything to protect. Sometimes she saw tracks, paw and paw, side by side, leading away into the endless dunes. Sometimes, just the memory of a howl at dusk, carried on the wind. The little girl grew up telling the story about the shepherd who wasn't just a stray, but a savior. About the lions who learned to trust a creature so unlike themselves. About the day the world changed, not because of what people did, but because of what they finally chose not to do. For the shepherd, the scars faded, but the memories lingered. He sometimes dreamed of cages and fire, of voices yelling commands in a language he no longer cared to remember. But when he woke, there were cubs licking his nose, a lioness resting beside him, the old king nuzzling his neck in silent approval. He knew, at last, what it meant to belong. Freedom was not just the absence of chains. It was the right to choose where you laid your head, whom you called family, and what you would risk for those you loved. The desert was still dangerous. The leopard would return, as would drought and hunger and the endless, testing sun. But now, whatever the world threw at them, the pride was more than just a family. They were a legend, a living challenge to every line and law humans had ever tried to draw. And so, life went on. Sometimes, travelers crossing the sand would glimpse a strange procession at sunrise. A regal old lion, a group of sturdy lionesses, a trail of bounding cubs, and, at their heart, a shepherd dog, coat shining gold, eyes clear and proud. They'd pause and watch, hearts beating a little faster, feeling for a moment that the world was wider and kinder than they'd believed. If this story reached something inside you, don't let it fade. Remember the shepherd, how he chose love over fear, family over safety, belonging over comfort. Remember the pride, who opened their circle to a stranger and found themselves changed forever. Remember the humans, who in the end learned the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes, to do the right thing, you must trust the wildness in another and in yourself. Let this story be more than just a tale for a quiet night. Let it be a reminder that every living being deserves a place, a choice, a second chance. So next time you see someone, human or animal, on the outside, don't look away. Open your circle. You never know what kind of legend might step in. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel. Every week we bring you stories of resilience, courage, and the unexpected power of kindness.